But yeah, my name's Gordon Reid, and I am talking to you from a Manchester hotel room on a very rainy and bleak day out there. And I run Middleboop, which is a design studio, branding studio, strategy. I actually started Middleboop about 12 years ago now. And the premise at the time, I mean, we've pivoted loads over the years. So started out as an illustrator. So it was just me trying to illustrate for magazines and album covers and all sorts of things like that. Then moved into advertising and used Middleboop as a kind of guise to get quite interesting advertising work. And I developed into becoming an art director, creative director there. Then lost my love for advertising for many reasons, which we can delve into. Right around the time where I felt that I could be adding more value to the clients that I work with directly, and actually enjoyed doing that sort of work a lot more as well, where I was working directly with clients, building a brand, helping start a business. So pivoted Middleboop to becoming a design studio or an agile studio, probably about 3 years ago now. And when I say it's an agile studio, it's me full-time, and we build a team around jobs. So there may be, I don't know, like a small juice brand who might come to us who want a bit of a strategy, kind of to market strategy, packaging, design. Maybe I can do that with myself and a junior and maybe a copywriter, or we work with a lot of bigger corporations like the Unilevers and HSBC and people like that, where I'll build a bit more of a full-scale team that we can tackle the projects there. So I think the premise of the company was very much to have this kind of unique approach whereby we are giving as much value to clients of various levels as possible, making sure that we can actually service all different types of people without letting anyone go. So if someone has a smaller budget, but it's going to be something really fun, then we can do that too. Maybe I'll just take that on. Or if it's something a little bigger that might be quite hellish, but pay the mortgage, then we can build teams to do that too. So that's the company. And then I do a lot of talking as well. I did before the world went a bit mad. I was doing quite a few speaking tours, talking about careers and doing all sorts of bits and bobs. And I run a project. So I ran a project 2 years ago with one of the designers that works with me, Callum, called Weird World Cup, where we sold 20 beer mats that were created and illustrated by various creatives, all based around people's favorite weird and humorous moments from previous World Cups. And we sold the beer mats for charity, which did quite well, which led me to doing a lot of speaking on the back of that. And we are balls deep right now in doing all of that again for the Euros. So we've just launched the project. It's called Weird Euros, weirdeuros.com. We're working this time with Adidas on that, who have a football. They've got a football collective which is full of different charities, grassroots football charities, with the idea of using football as a catalyst for doing better, making it inclusive to everyone, and providing more opportunities. So we're doing Weird Euros, and we've got some great artists this time. We managed to get like David Shrigley on board and Chris Simpson artists, and they're all doing these weird little moments that we're printing onto beer mats, which is insane, but it's done all right. So that is a very long-winded intro to what I do.
There's a lot to pull apart there, Gordon, but before we do, can we go back before Middleboop to sort of understand how you got to launching your own business, your own studio agency, and then how it's developed from there? What was the backstory before that? Was it a university perspective? Was there junior roles in other studios near where you are? Did you expand and go to other parts of the country or world, or what was that? What was those experiences like?
A little journey. Well, so basically, I didn't know really until I was a bit older that you could do graphic design as a sort of course, really. And I think I was about 16, and I was working in pubs at the time, and kind of hating my college years. I was doing all sorts of shit stuff, like IT and really boring stuff. And I met these two guys at a pub who were working with me at the time, and they were doing a course. I lived in Epsom, which is obviously something you may know is a good kind of college town, and for art and design. And I saw some of the work that they were doing, and it was really like rudimentary graphic design work, you know, but I was really impressed because it was that kind of light bulb moment where it was like, fuck, you can do this for a living, you can make art and apply it to products. And like, for some reason, I just assumed that, you know, things got made before then. And it was that kind of catalyst moment whereby kind of after that, I was able to blag my way straight onto a course in Epsom, like a foundation 2-year degree course.
Yeah.
I didn't have anything. I had this sort of ramshackle bit of painting, bollocks painting and writing, and I don't know how they let me on, but I was able to talk my way onto it. And that was kind of a game changer, really, because for those 2 years I was allowed to really experiment with art and design and learn about typography, learn about illustration, and kind of pave a bit of a journey for myself from this moment, all from meeting these guys in a pub, changing the whole kind of trajectory of my life, really. And from there went to Southampton Solent University, which at the time was voted the worst university in the country. And I did a really weird course. It was like, it's called graphic image making. It doesn't exist anymore. And it was very much to do with just program after program. Flash for a month, you do Flash for a month, then you've done that, and then you do Cinema 4D for a month, and then you tick that off. And I think I was on a very different level to the way that the course was run, because I loved collage at the time, and I really loved the artwork of people like Michelle Thompson, Vault 49, and all these kind of great studios and artists that were doing this work. And so I was doing loads of collage because I felt this is what I want to do for the rest of my life, man. And got terrible grades. By the third year, I'd kind of worked out where my lecturers went for a drink, and I had a few pints with them, and kind of really started talking about design in a different way. You know, I'd actually spent quite a lot of my time in the library for a couple of years reading about design history and different design movements throughout the years. And I think they were quite impressed by sort of my knowledge of various subjects, and kind of saw me in a different light. And I remember doing this project, which was exactly the same style of work as I've been doing for 2 years, but I got a better grade. And I remember the guys going, "Why weren't you doing work like this from the start?" And I'm like, I was. You just didn't see any kind of value in it. But yeah, so I did 3 years there, and left university in 2007, 2008, right around the financial crash. Yeah. So no jobs really going for any juniors. And also for my style, I was in that position where basically, because I had spent 3 years doing more illustrative style work, really didn't know the basics of design to apply to something, you know, kind of paid standard of work. Yeah. So there just was no chance I'd be getting a kind of junior design role or anything like that. And I was really stubborn. I was really, you know, I met a good friend of mine, Radim, who might be on this, might not be. He was a few years older than me, and he was the kind of design hero in Southampton. Very small scene. he was the sort of guy, and we just had a number of fun evenings together. And I think he helped me out quite a lot, because he was doing very much quite successful design merged with illustration. for ad campaigns and brands and all sorts of stuff. So early on, he helped me out quite a lot and kind of inspired me. You know, I was doing a lot of shit work at the beginning just to make ends meet, working in shops and doing all sorts of things and just trying to develop a style to some degree, kind of inspired by what he was doing a few years along. And then I think how things started to change, I was running a music site. I was doing zines and all sorts of stuff. So I loved all sorts of alternative music that not many people did, and felt that I could start creating artwork for some of these bands. And I used to go to a festival quite a lot that my friends ran called All Tomorrow's Parties, which the sort of premise of the festival was that there's no egos, there's no hierarchy. So you would meet bands that were playing. So you'd walk past like Iggy Pop or Nick Cave or someone like that and be like, all right. And it kind of broke down the barriers for me a little bit that people in the music scene were on this trajectory. You know, they were just people that were in the same sort of scenarios as I was. So I started reaching out to musicians and magazines and all sorts of stuff. And through the contacts that I've made with the music site I was running, was able to start picking up my first few clients, really. I think my first ever logo job was Bella Union Records, and it was an email by a guy called Simon Raymond, who was actually the bass player in one of my favourite bands, the Cocteau Twins. And I didn't realise that at first, and we'd been having these emails flying back and forth, and he'd been trying to do me out of some money, and then I kind of put two and two together and was like, just done my first commission job and been fucked over for money by my
hero.
You know. So yeah, I think things just developed kind of naturally from there, really. I got a lot of press early on in my career because I was doing a lot of work with quite interesting bands, and I was sending it to Design Week and Computer Arts and people like that. But there's still this real factor whereby I was doing quite fun work that I enjoyed. I was in magazines, I was having articles written about me. I couldn't actually afford to move out of my mum's house because, funnily enough, the music industry and editorial didn't pay that well. So I guess I started pivoting what I wanted to do around that point, because obviously at some point I needed to move out and develop things further. And there was another catalyst day whereby I was still working in this shop. So I had this really weird double life whereby in the mornings I'd be working in the shop serving food to people, and in the evenings I'd be creating artwork for bands, going to gigs, selling the prints on the merch stand, meeting people. And people in the local town I was in at the time had no idea. They just thought I was a bullshitter because they saw me working in this shop. They'd be like, "What are you doing tonight?" I'm like, "Well, I'm heading up to like Coco or Shepherd's Bush Empire to sell 100 prints for like Yola Tengo or something." They just people couldn't fathom what I was doing in this sort of weird double life. But yeah, I got sacked from this shop for a number of reasons, and signed on. It was a proper moment where it was like, what do I do now? And I was lucky this, but a friend of mine within about 2 days just texted me and said, "Do you fancy working for this company that I'm working for? We need a designer who can do infographics." I'm thinking, I could probably do them. With the style that I've got, I think I could do that quite well. So I ended up becoming their lead designer, but only because I was the only designer. And it was for a stag do company. It was so ridiculous. It was like a sort of place where, like, if you wanted a roly-poly stripper at 3 a.m, these guys would sort you out. And I'm banging out all these infographics for them. But I learned loads in that sort of few months that I was there because, funnily enough, the sort of people that work there aren't particularly the most creative or inventive people. So learning how to deal with clients who they need a problem solved that's creative, but they have no idea how to brief it in or how to get there. That was me trying to do the detective work on how to figure out what these guys needed. And that really helped me out kind of in the future. But from there, I had enough work in my portfolio by that point to convince recruiters that I might know a few things about design. So I had a couple of guys take a chance and throw me off into some really bad little studios in various places for freelance rates. But it was great because I was learning as I was going, learning by doing. And I guess because I'd missed it, I now look back at this time, I hated it at the time, but I now look back at it and think it was so important because I didn't have that training that a lot of people would have done in design. And I didn't have that junior role whereby you can ease yourself into a career. You're kind of cushioned by a lot of the bigger pressures, but you can just create some fun stuff. So these early freelance gigs for various atrocious places were really important. And yeah, that all developed into working in advertising. And my plan there was so I was still illustrating, and I kind of saw I was targeting big ad jobs at the time. And I thought if I could get 2 or 3 ad jobs a year, I can pay the rent, I can live comfortably, and I can have the rest of the time to do editorial, do other fun briefs that are coming through. And it was a real struggle at the time. I think there tends to be a trend where you're either going with photography or illustration. And I think at the time, a lot of people were commissioning a lot of photography work. There wasn't a lot of illustration work being commissioned. But I started getting asked to go and work as a freelancer in advertising roles as a designer. So I thought I could infiltrate people from the inside, do this design work, and then kind of go, oh, by the way, here's my illustration portfolio, and see if that works. And it actually did a couple of times kick off. But I think as time went on, I really started to enjoy, I started to verge more into doing art direction. And I realized because I'd spent so many years being directed as an illustrator or creative by various art directors and learning good art direction and bad art direction from my own gut feeling, felt I could do that stage quite well. And that was quite a nice position to be in at the time because I had a lot of contacts in the illustration world and the creative world. And I could start pulling in people and building jobs up for advertisers. So I was doing that for quite a while. Saatchi and Saatchi for a couple of years, Ogilvy, like some quite big names doing, I mean, anything from like dog food ads to like a global Olympics campaign we did. That was pretty mad. And that Olympics campaign I then used to start getting talks and start making a bit more of a name for myself. Because I just thought it was one of those ones where it was a pitch, and it was for Visa, who sponsored the Olympics in Rio. And our studio manager came around and said, does anyone want this pitch? You'd probably have to work a weekend. And people were sort of like, keeping their heads down. And then she said, the Olympics is going to be for like advertising that. So I just jumped on it straight away. Yeah, because, we all know like Lance Wyman's Mexico Olympics work. And I mean, you do something like that and it can become incredibly iconic. Not for me in the end, but it was certainly very, very handy to like get in touch with D&AD and start working with them and start doing talks and off the back of this project, because there was quite an interesting story to tell with how we got there in the end. And like, there was a day where I thought I was going to have to fly to Greece with a memory stick because their servers couldn't take the, I don't know, like 5 gig files that we were sending over for the artwork for the print ads. There's all sorts of all sorts of weird stuff that was going on. But yeah, shall I keep talking?
Yeah, no. So yeah, well, I mean, does that lead us up to today? I think more than anything, that was just more of a just
getting up to today.
Yeah, is that what timeline is that? So if you've gone from say uni through your working, with on cultural projects that pop culture that you were, or indie culture that you were interested in, right through to the freelance roles and then into some of those bigger names that you mentioned, was that then the catalyst? If that was in say Versace or Ogilvy on advertising, was that the catalyst then to create your own advertising agency for Middleboop, which is now a design agency? Is that really that timeline? Is that what joins that together?
Yeah, pretty much. So basically, like, I've been doing the freelance thing for a long time, and it was great because there were years where I'd get a lot of work in through Middleboop anyway, whether it was starting to become branding work, whether it was illustration, whatever. And then the freelance stuff would then kind of crop up, make sure that I kind of led a bit more of a comfortable life. And some of them were not great gigs. Some of them, like with Saatchi, I ended up, that was a 3-week booking from a mate of mine, and ended up being there for like 2 years on and off. But yeah, it sort of got to this point where I felt that I'd reached the ceiling of what advertising could give me, and I could kind of see from working with clients direct myself and knowing that there's a better way of doing it. I felt that there was a big disconnect between the brands that I was working for and the actual work, because I never really got to speak to clients. It was very rare that I'd speak to clients directly. That'd be handled by account managers and all sorts of other people, and it would be filtered down. But I always felt like, really, from already working directly with clients, you can make work that really fits what those sort of people want, and you can do it quicker and more efficiently, and a lot cheaper.
Yeah.
So I was kind of falling out of love with advertising anyway. Rates weren't getting any higher. Work was getting a bit more stretched, and I was in places where I was used to working in bigger design teams. So some of the bigger ones, you'd have a bigger design team and you'd have a bit more security. But I was starting to work in places where a lot of people had been laid off, or they just had a really small design team, and you could see like the guys were so good, but they were just working. They were just working all hours of the day for whatever, dog food ads or God knows what.
Yeah.
Like starting to think, what's next? Because by this point I was in my 30s, just about in my 30s, and I'm thinking like, I don't know if I want to be a sort of 50 or 60-year-old freelance designer.
Yeah.
Still working weekends, still getting bent over by different agencies for money. And I'm just like, I want to do my own thing. I'm used to doing my own thing. And so I had a couple of jobs come in through like a cold brew coffee startup called Sandow's, which is wrapped up last year, unfortunately. But that guy became a bit of we sort of mentored each other a bit, because he obviously was completely immersed in the food and beverage FMCG world, and I was quite immersed in the creative world. And we had a lot of chats about kind of, if he was to work with another studio, what would he want? How would that be what would the perfect experience be? And he asked me a lot of questions from my side too. And I think from there, I started to think there's a lot of brands that I could really help and really add value to. I put more of a stamp on it too. I mean, it's always nice when you drive past a bus poster that you've worked on, but when you kind of put it in your portfolio, you're like, what have I really done?
Yeah.
20%, 30%. The idea got bastardized incredibly by 20 different people. Whereas if you're working direct, you have a smaller team. You just get things done. So I had a couple of jobs that I lost, that I was up for. Like there was a beer brand rebrand, and there was a sauce brand, and I was just like, this is it. This is kind of the ticket out of there. we didn't win either of those jobs, but I learned a lot from both of those about how I needed to represent the studio, because both of those ended up, they have funding, so they have money to pay properly. But because the work at the time in the studio was on the website was very much, well, we got some illustration here and there's some branding here and there's some advertising. It was kind of throwing people quite a bit. So I ended up hiring a new business team around this point, and they did a full kind of audit with me on you know, what the KPIs would be for my first year as a studio, rather than Gordon Reid doing this, that, and the other. And we filtered down a lot of the fluff on the website, started talking in a different way. That was a really big one. So I actually took quite a bit of time off work, of kind of design work, read quite a lot of more sort of marketing strategy books, listened to a lot of podcasts, which might sound boring as hell, quite frankly, but it was so beneficial, because I realized even the website, the way that and the decks that I would send to people were just so geared up to kind of talk to someone as if they knew exactly what graphic design was about, but actually failed to hit what someone who's maybe a marketeer or a founder of a business might want to hear. And that was it. That was the real big change in doing that sort of work, because suddenly the same inquiries that I was getting for these sort of jobs, wasn't quite landing, was starting to land. Because I was talking to people, marketeers and founders, in a language that they understood. So I kind of put myself in their shoes. So instead of going, you know, we can do your logo and we'll do your brand strategy and this, that, and the other, you know, talking more about kind of metrics and how we can kind of ease the pressures of work that they need to do fast, and how we can kind of communicate to customers and consumers. And I think I really thought that I'd spend a couple of years working with, like, you know, coffee shops and people that didn't really have too much back pocket. I was like fully ready to take a bit of a hit on earnings for a year, just to kind of get this thing right and going. And then I got put in touch with a fella from Unilever, Mark Howard, he's become a mate of mine now. And that was a really big change. So he had a startup within an incubator at Unilever that he was just developing. And he'd already worked with a good studio on that, who'd sort of set them up initially for business. So kind of, they had a toolkit, they had bits and bobs, but they needed to actually run the brand out. They needed packaging, they needed advertising, and work on the tone of voice. And we just had this long conversation where I was more interested in how the product was being made, and was it as sustainable as it could be, and could we push that further, and is the packaging that they want to be, is that going to fit through the letterbox, and what's the fulfillment? But just sort of, I think, questions that he wasn't quite expecting. And we managed to land that one, which was the first kind of gig where it was like, okay, this is kicking off really now. It's we can kind of start building on this sort of work, and ended up doing a lot of work with Unilever over a couple of years, so different startups, and then taking on other kind of bigger corporate clients. So I guess it was a bit of, I don't know, you know, we had people that were hammering guys on LinkedIn, founders and marketeers, and not getting anywhere, and doing that sort of low-hanging fruit, cold calling work. But as always, I mean, it's a bit of a golden thread with what we've been talking about. It's sort of a mate put me in touch with this guy, and you know, we're talking the right language. And I remember he said at the time he'd spoken to about 30 different people, from freelance designers all the way to kind of bigger studios, Ragged Edge and people like that, and nothing felt like it fit until we had that conversation.
Yeah.
And that was great to win that client and do that work. And we did some great work, and, you know, really enjoyed my time with those guys. But also it enabled me to kind of realize, okay, well, this style of kind of chat that we've got now, is working. It's going in the right way. And from working with those guys, I've just been able to develop further and learn more about sort of the D2C market and all sorts of like FMCG sort of style things and products and fulfillment. And it's enabled us to offer more to clients. So now we kind of have a setup where we've got two options when you work with us. And one is if you're a self-funded bootstrap startup that might not have a huge budget, we can work from our little studio or my spare room most of the time at the moment, and build something up that way and do it quick and get them set up to market, give them everything they'll need. We've done that now for like chocolate brands and coffee brands, and who else are we working with at the moment? 2 different skincare brands we've got going on, and it's all from selling in that sort of way. And we've got the other option whereby, because I always feel that no one is going to know more about your brand than you as the founder or you as the person that's running it, and we can go in and be an advisor and advise as best we can, but it's that I hated that disconnect between being in a studio and moaning about the client, whatever, oh god, they've asked for more amends, and actually just working with them and collaborating with those clients together. So the second part of it would be we kind of offer, we can work directly with you, as in we can move into your office. If it's me, if it's 3 or 4 of us, we can be there and be an extended arm of the team, so that, because startups are fast paced, right? I mean, it's if a day goes by where you've not made sales and something, that's critical. So to have someone that's just there, a part of that team, a part of that journey, I felt would be of more value to people than the other way, than just being a supplier. And I think that's benefited us and clients quite a bit.
It's fascinating, because I'd normally inject more questions into this, but I just sort of mesmerised by the story, because it's something that resonates with me. Sounds very similar to my sort of journey, and sort of it's like listening to yourself back. But I think that's really important, what you're saying there about, it's something I've experienced, is that it's design or an agency or startup freelancer isn't just necessarily about creating something that's aesthetically pleasing. It's about going much deeper into the clients, whether they pay for it or not. For me, it's sometimes slightly irrelevant. It's about how you feel and what you want to give or prove. So going back to like the Unilever, like thinking about the letterbox size, for instance, or think about the packaging or the messaging or that. I think that's really, really important for people to explore and understand, that design isn't just about the thing that you see on the front of a brochure or on the package. It's about the material the package is made out of. It's the size, the shape, all the factors that go into that are really, really important into what you give a client and how much they get from that. You're trying to add value and advice and experience, but also take away work and jobs from their desk, aren't you? And that, also going back to what you're saying about the tone of voice that you started to use as a studio through the team that you used to develop that. I think that when I spoke to James at Koto as part of this series, that's one thing. He's the only person I think that said it, about investing in yourself and taking the time to really treat yourself like a client and understand what you stand for. You're not just a designer. You're not just not just an illustrator. You've got to go a lot more deeper than that for people to fully understand what you can provide.
Absolutely.
And that comes across then in barrels about, that sort of stands you apart from the millions of other agencies that are very similar out there.
I hope so. Yeah, we need a USP.
There are a lot of people doing a lot. People. Say if you've been doing it for 20 years, there's going to be millions of other people that have been doing it for 20 years. There's going to be millions of other people that are just as good at it, but you've got to sort of have a reason to be the one that the client chooses, whether that's your style or the culture or the what you stand for, your ethos. There has to be something there that makes you be different to the others.
Absolutely, and it's an incredibly hard thing to do, because really we're all selling the same. We're all selling snake oil, aren't we?
Yeah.
But it's I just found when I started to get more involved in that sort of things, like fulfillment and process of packaging and sustainability, and are we working as hard as we can be, I started to enjoy it more as well. Like I kind of lost a love for design in a lot of ways when advertising was still about. And as the business has gone on over the last few years, I've developed a sort of different love for the industry again, because I'm learning more about the business side of things and more about, like we were saying, packaging, and I feel that I'm influencing people on a different level, and we are as a studio. And the guys that I work with can be anyone from designers that I've worked with in the past, copywriters, creatives, project managers. But we've got, I mean, one of the other guys, Callum, who's doing the Weird Euros with me, we share a client, Manual, who they do bloody dick pills and God knows what. It's like a men's health brand, but he's in that zone as well now, because he's their designer. We help out with packaging and 3D rendering and all sorts of stuff, but he's talking in that language as well. And there are designers out there that kind of, that can go above and beyond, I think, and I think it is still rare, because you meet a lot of people just.
I personally think it's about like sort of finding yourself, isn't it? It takes a long time you go through the early phases of being a bit nervous, following the herd, getting to a point where you probably just revolt from that because you're fed up, sick and tired of just doing what everyone else is doing. And then I think it then becomes a bit of a split where you really think design is part of who you are and use it to change the world or use it to improve other people's lives, or you just continue just to treat it as a job and it's just a 9 to 5. And I think there's quite a large portion of people do that because they don't really maybe don't connect with it on a deeper level. I'm not too sure why, but I know for myself and the people that I've sort of looked up to or spoke to and admired, it's always been about something much deeper than that. It's about how you can change a business's future, how you can change the consumers, how you can change communities and people's lives through design. Not just to sell, not just for profit, not just for fame. It's much deeper than that. I think that's where that comes from. That's what it sounds like to me. For you, it's going above and beyond in terms of what it means to you, how you connect it with other people, and that's really important, I think.
Yeah, and we could be choosy with who we take on for these reasons as well. And I think it's a really good point there that using design to actually make more of a change. It's one of the questions I always ask pretty much first when someone engages with us or inquires about a product that they've got or whatever, a service is, what is the target for this beyond making money, right? I mean, what is the mission for this brand beyond just paying the mortgage? Yeah. And I mean, I got that from I read, like going back to these strategy books and stuff like that. I mean, there's a lot of chat about that, but it's completely true. I mean, in this day and age, in the day of the DTC sort of brands, and everyone's got a startup, everyone's got something that they're trying to do. How do you stand apart? And it's all about that communication. And I think I saw Matey Boy from Ragged Edge, old Max. He's banging the drum quite a lot at the moment for the power of copy, and the power of the tone of voice with a brand, and how much he has to fight to get a good copywriter to be sold into some of these jobs. And I have the same in my. People laugh sometimes. We've had jobs where, you say, right, we need to develop a really strong tone of voice based around our mission statement, based around the brand archetype, whatever it is. And people are like, I think we can do that.
Yeah.
And then you get this gobbledygook back. And you're like, well, how are you going to communicate this? Like, if I was reading that as someone that wanted to buy that juice or that CBD brand or whatever the fuck it is, if I'm reading that, I'm not going to buy it because it doesn't communicate well to me. And
I find that most of the, I can't speak for anybody else, but the businesses or the brands that I work with, a lot of the time that they don't really fully appreciate what design is or what all of that encompasses and what it revolves around it, whether it is copy or photography or illustration. Maybe it's just what the mainstream has sort of fed them, but like, say, copy, for instance, people refer to things like political copy, so it has to be like really short and snappy, and it doesn't have to be like that. It's like photography you see on mainstream news is always got Shutterstock written over it, so everyone thinks that's where all photographs come from. Like same with illustrators, they're just illustrations are downloaded for free off certain resources, so everybody thinks you could just get it for free. They don't necessarily always understand the personal, the bespoke, the unique aspect to a lot of this. And I think I find my biggest battles are trying to, more than anything, Chinese burn clients into actually doing something different, not just following the herd. So it's not always the consumer that you've got to try and convince, is it? It's trying to get the trust of clients to believe in what you're telling them.
It's all about the trust, and this is why it goes back to that collaboration element. I found has been so important there, because with anything that I've taken on, where it's freelance, whether it was illustration, whatever, if you don't have that trust early on, then it's almost, sometimes it's like whatever you produce, you could produce an amazing fucking Mondrian style piece of artwork, and they're going to hate it because they don't have that trust. And it's I think I learned that from freelancing early on, and learning ways of trying to sort of develop a trust or develop a rapport with people quite quickly. But it's, I think it's now that we do what we do, it's so important to have that collaborative effort, because I think then the clients feel like they've had a really strong input into the work, and sometimes that can be really helpful, sometimes not, but also you have that trust early on, so you're confident going into that presentation, whatever it is, that they trust you, they're going to hopefully buy something that you're going to sell them, all of that stuff. But if you don't have that, it's important. But
if that experience can be mutually beneficial and mutually enjoyable, that makes it all the better, isn't it? And I think that's what you were saying earlier about falling out of love with design. I went through the same a couple of years ago. I think that was because it gets basically beaten out of you a lot of the time. For the one or two pieces that you put in your portfolio on your website, there's a 50 or so that are put in the bin as soon as I finish, because because you're not happy about it. And like you were saying about the ones that you that bus stop piece that you might see as you go past it, and you can say to your mum, "Oh, look at this, I did that," but really it's just another piece of paper in another bus stop. And what's the real impact that you've had on that business, or on that future of that corporation, or or that team that you work with? Even if it's not something you put in your portfolio, if there's much more pride in that, driven by the impact you had, that outweighs any sort of public showing of success, I think.
Yeah, totally, for sure.
That's looking at the time, we've rapidly got to 45 minutes.
Have we? God, that went quick, didn't it?
Yeah, it always does, especially when you're broadcasting from Manchester bedroom.
What's that like? Look at that. It's a nice view, that.
Yeah, we're throwing it down here, so it has done all week. But yeah, no, I really appreciate that, Gordon. I hope everybody's got a lot out of that. It's I found that really immersed in that. I was fascinated by what you were saying. I think there's another 45 minutes in there in future about advertising, that industry and the myths that come with it.
Oh, I could go on, mate. Yeah, I could definitely go on.
I think that'd be a really interesting topic to explore in future, just to sort of understand some of those sort of stereotypes around that, and how that's maybe disbanded a little bit. And from my perspective, I see a lot of agencies are creating all sorts of output now, from advertising or digital, or print as well. So maybe it's gone in a different direction, and maybe that's a good thing, and it will change in the future. But I think that's for another time. But as I was saying to you earlier, and as we've been doing recently, if anybody wants to hang in for another 15 minutes to ask Gordon any questions, he's kindly going to hang around for a little bit longer. But if you're not, it's been a pleasure to have you on board again. Next week, I'm speaking to Brian Edmondson from C. I don't know if you know Brian, Gordon.
No, never heard of him, no.
They're quite a classical sort of, traditional craft of design. They've worked with like J.F. Smith's quite a lot, and Rankin and people like that. Nice. So that's on next Friday. But yeah, if anybody wants to stay in and ask Gordon a question, please turn on your mics and your videos if you want to, and fire away. But for everybody else that needs to shoot off, it's been a pleasure. I hope you have a good weekend, and we'll see you again all soon.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
That was really good, mate. No, I appreciate that. It's fascinating. Even when it runs sort of parallel to your own, it's still always interesting to hear other people's experiences. It's just sort of, I think I'm just a nosy, curious sod. I just like to think actually other people have been through the same sorts of ups and downs as I have, and it's sort of reassuring in some sort of way.
Like massively reassuring, yeah, and that's why things like this are so good, because it's yeah, you do get to talk to your peers about it, and I think it's not said enough. I think the struggles that we can kind of have in the industry, really.
Yeah, and also I find it's breaking down the barriers a little bit about, you know, we see websites and logos of agencies and people in, you know, it's nice that all these great resources, but sometimes it can make you feel a bit, even if you've been doing it for a long time, you can sometimes think, I mean, they're miles ahead of where I am, and I should be like sort of, you know, sort of compare yourself, which is a bit of a lesser of two evils, isn't it? But by doing this, this isn't necessarily about. I don't really want people in a nice way. I don't want them to show their portfolio. I talk about their studio. I talk in the, you know, in terms of talk about, you know, how great their studio looks and all the aesthetics and the massive clients. They just want to know about the, you know, the journey and the struggles and the highs and the lows, all these ups and downs. Because I think it hopefully just sort of equalises it a little bit for people that are, like I say, these things are primarily, what I'm doing is primarily aimed at younger people. It's not exclusive to that, but primarily aimed at younger people. And sort of maybe gives them a bit of reassurance that, you know, we are just, you know, human. We are just sort of trying our best. We've had some luck along the way. We've worked pretty hard. We've sort of got our head down and, you know, figured it out as we went. It wasn't giving it all on a plate. And it goes to show that maybe that's when, if I was 18, 19, 20 again, I wish that maybe I had that, because there wasn't anything like that, you know, 22 years ago. It was all very much, you know, little agencies that were just didn't have access to much, you know, social media wasn't a thing and all those sorts of cliches. It'd be nice just to sort of, if we can give something back by revealing some of these, you know, things like workplace bullying, things like imposter syndromes, for not, you know, being, you know, just not adequate, all these sorts of things. Even from the outside, it might look like you're doing good. It's there's still a lot of, you know, battles behind the scenes.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You know, I think it's yeah, it's the imposter syndrome is a big one in our industry, because it's so visual what we do, and I think, I mean, you touched on it there with, you know, looking at It's Nice That or various sites and going, oh, I should be doing work like that, and it's, yeah, it's so hard because it's so easy to get wrapped up in feeling like that, and I think everyone does. I don't think there's anyone out there that is just doing amazing work and going, I'm shit hot, and that's it. I think everyone's struggling.
I think I did when I was about 22.
Oh yeah. No, actually, I did have a time. I did have a time when I did, actually, and then it was after the Olympic stuff. And I remember, this is when I used to talk about this in all of my talks, and it was that sort of that quote about no one's good enough to stop learning, right? And I did think, yeah, I must have been 28, the Olympics, did some quite big work, partying a lot, and I really thought I was like, I know my shit now, and I'm at a good level, and I can really push on. And then we had a really, really demanding client, which was Asda, and it was so funny because it should have been such simple design work, but we had a team of 3 and we were struggling with it, you know. And I realised that I started learning a bit more. We took on a kind of older designer who was really good and really just level-headed, and he'd worked with these sort of clients for like 20, 30 years. And I was like, oh, but there's still quite a lot to learn. Yeah. And that never stops, you know.
Yeah, no, I think I wish I would have been more interested in the education process when I was in it, and what I'm more interested in it now. You know, learning and reading things and trying to do techniques and experimenting with things that, you know, that are outside of my comfort zone now. I wish I was more like that younger. Yeah. But it was fresher. But you know, I suppose you learn from your mistakes, don't you? That's the whole point. But yeah, it's an interesting because I feel like it's at the minute it's on a bit of a bounce back, and there's I don't know about you guys, but during lockdown 1, it was all a bit doom and gloom, obviously. But now it feels like there seems to be a different sort of level to it now. There's like a lot of people willing to give back. There's a lot of people, you know, looking to sort of guide others, whether it's in different disciplines or different age groups or whatever it might be. There's a lot of people out there doing some really good things, you know, as well as their own work, spending a lot of time helping others, which is, like I say, I don't seem to remember that a long time ago. I don't know if it was just the sort of places that I worked or just the the sort of environments I was in, it felt a little bit sort of like going, get on with it, and sort of was just put in front of a Mac and left to your own devices without any guidance or any brief or proper brief or any sort of really understanding of a client. It was just pretty much guesswork. And if they liked it, they liked it. It was, you hit the jackpot. If they didn't, you just kept on going at it without any knowledge of what they wanted.
Scattergun approach.
Yeah, but it was like that for years. I don't know why. In hindsight, it was all I knew at the time, but in hindsight, it was ridiculous mentality to have. Sort of such a time wasting sort of idea. It was bizarre. You just thought, just pick pink because it was a colour that you liked that day. It had no resonance to anything. It was just, let's make it blue, put a picture on it and some big text, and that would be it. I think it was more a case you followed trends too much. It was what was in creative review that the directors would say, just copy that. It's such a strange place. But again, I suppose all of these things, they guide you in the long term, don't they?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's like you say, it's a bit of a time wasting tool, sort of the scattergun approach, but everyone does it, and until you realise that actually, not only does it waste your time, it wastes the client's time, because you could do. Well, we got Radim's on the line. He always talks about sharpening the axe before cutting down the tree, right? If I've got to cut down a tree, then you spend 70% of your time doing that first. And it's well, Radim didn't say it, but he says it in his talks, and it's true, because it's just that prep work and doing the detective work first, and spending that extra time with the client, really getting to the core of what they're all about, and then you produce work that is fully informed. It's always a better outcome, I think. Yeah,
and I've found that since I went to a place in Birmingham and they had that approach, and it was fascinating because the creative took hardly any time once you knew fully what you had to try and achieve. It was sort of slightly irrelevant in some respects. It was, it was about solving the problem, and we spent months working with the clients, going on site to sort of quiz the directors and the team, and ask them all those sort of like Simon Sinek sort of questions about why and all those sorts of things, which are really fascinating because you get to understand what you're trying to achieve. And then sitting in front of a Mac took no time at all, which was really refreshing. Moving from somewhere where it was no questions asked, sit in front of a Mac for a week, it was the complete opposite, which is quite nice to sort of really immerse yourself in that brand or those people, because you feel like you're actually making an impact, which is what you were saying throughout the talk.
Yeah, I think that's it. And it's, if you don't immerse yourself in the brand and you don't have a kind of love for what they do, or you find a love in what they do, then what's the point? What's the point in working with them?
Right. I think I'm going to go and search "It's Nice That" for Abraham Lincoln now after what's
oh yeah, there you go. Yeah.
But I don't think there's many questions going to come through, Gordon, by the looks of it. So I'll love you and leave you if that's all right. Get yourself prepared for either your train back or your mighty sesh on the town.
Bit of both, I think.
Or a sesh on the train.
Nothing else to do. There's nothing to do. What do you do in a rainy Manchester?
Go home.
Go home. Yeah, go home. Yeah.
But it's great to talk to you, mate. It was a real pleasure. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'm sure we'll catch up again soon, and maybe commentary in the future.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for having me, and thanks for listening, guys. I hope it was some help or entertainment.
I'll wait for the refund request to come through.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Now, take care, mate. Speak to you soon. Thank you, everybody. Ta-da.
Thanks, guys.